So tonight we are here to introduce you to the introducers. I'm going to ask a board member to come up in each case and introduce to you one of the young people who has nominated a candidate whom the board ultimately selected for one of our awards. And a little more detail on the awards. The awards are $20,000 plus a large plaque suitable for putting in your living room wall. The $20,000 is 3/4 for you to do with as you please, minus the share you will give to the government, and $5,000 to go to your school as you direct, which means they have to propose something that you endorse, and that gets sent to us, and then we send them their check. So the idea is that they participate in your fortune doubly, one by having you as a teacher, and one by having you able to help fund something that your school sorely needs. The part about the IRS, I do have to mention, some people believe that prizes are not taxable. I've been informed by good tax authority that you'll get in serious trouble if you don't pay your share to Caesar. Okay. So without any further ado, let's get started. Our first board member to introduce a nominator is Don Carlston. Don?
I'm here to introduce the nominator who will introduce Brian Deller, about whom I want to say something at the end of my introduction of the introducer of Brian Deller. But before I introduce Jim Spratling, who will introduce Brian Deller, I also want to mention he has a second nominator here, Isella Rosella, who is over here. Whose story actually is somewhat similar to Jim's. They're both first-generation college students. She went on to get a degree at Stanford and is currently that would be the Purdue of the West. And she is currently the managing director of a private equity real estate firm. So she, like Jim Spratling, who will introduce Brian, has been very successful. But they can't both speak, so I wanted to give her credit and thank her for coming. Jim Spratling is also a first-generation college student. And he said something very interesting to me when we talked earlier today, which is his perception is that it's the best and the worst students who get most of the teacher's attention. And that as a student in the middle, he kind of felt like he was going nowhere and nobody would notice that he was going nowhere, but that Brian Deller noticed him and treated him as though he was always going somewhere. And in fact, Azila earlier mentioned a very similar perception, that Brian always treated them like they were going to be a success. And due to that expectation, they ultimately were. So Jim got his BA in communications and his MA in counseling at Sacramento State. And he's now a high school counselor. And DOG, as he put it, that stands for Director of Counseling. That looks like, that's Doc. What's Director of Guidance? Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. Yes, thank you. At Ponderosa High School, as many of you know, I'm not actually a Californian, so I have no idea where Ponderosa High School is, but I'm informed it's somewhere near Folsom Prison, which I have heard of. I actually asked if I could introduce Brian, and the reason for this was when I went through all his materials, I discovered that in his interview, He indicated that his teaching philosophy was based partially on the work of Carol Dweck on mindsets. And this was a thrill to me because Carol, like me, is a social psychologist, and I know Carol. And so I asked Carol if she would be willing to autograph a book for Brian. So this is Carol Dweck's latest book on mindsets. And I want to read you the inscription because although it was directed towards Brian, I actually think it pertains to most of you as well. So what Carol wrote was, "Dear Brian, keep on growing those young brains and keep on inspiring students to enjoy and pursue challenging learning. I am very moved by how inspired your students are by your spirit and your respect for them. Warm regards, Carol Dweck." Sure, I will do that. And now, Jim, if you would come up and introduce whoever it is you're going to introduce, please.
Funny thing about his comment about the dog and Doc. About a year ago, I was doing a freshman orientation, so we had a gym full of about 3,000 parents, and dog is the title of my school at work. It's a fancy term for head of counselor or director of guidance, but I told all the parents I wanted to go by Doc because I always wanted a doctorate's degree. So all these parents since that freshman class have all called me Doc, and it's been great. So thank you, Don, for continuing on the Doc legend. So hello and thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight and for the Carlston Family Foundation. It's great to continue to support educators like Brian and everyone else in this room. When I was asked to reflect upon what I remember about Brian Deller and his classes, to be honest, I struggled. I was in his class in 1994. So to me, it seems like a long time ago, and hopefully for you, it doesn't seem like that long ago. Although I may not remember the freshman state standards that Brian had, he actually taught me a lot more. What I did take away from his class had actually nothing to do with science. And I would not realize the importance of what I had learned until much later in life. He was the type of teacher that made it a point not only to teach the required material, but to look beyond the books and see actual students for who they were. It was his connection with me that made a difference in my life. It was Brian's general interest and care that kept me connected to him and to high school. For the first time, someone other than my parents was genuinely interested in my life. And thinking about it, one time in high school, a teacher actually told me my life was like a drain and I was just going down the tubes. I don't know if you remember that conversation, but this actually is in my speech. That stuck with me, and he kind of defended me along that whole way, and I'll never remember the conversations we had. So thank you. I'm pretty sure I know what teacher I'm referring to. Thank you for your support. So my life is no longer in the tubes. Having someone at school that cared about me and actually made me want to come to school. This connection made the rest of school bearable, and without it and without you, I would not be where I am today. His care and encouragement even continued after high school. I can remember being about 20 years old and talking to him in his driveway about my slow progress at the local community college in Santa Rosa. Even though I doubted myself, he told me he was proud of me and what I had accomplished. This moment stuck with me, and I wanted to continue to make him proud, and I went on to earn a master's degree. Now, as an educator myself, I'm able to reflect on what Brian had done for me by just taking interest in my life. Many students are like myself and don't enjoy attending school. They're kind of just caught in the middle. But if they have a teacher, a coach, a club, or even a sport that provides them a sense of connection to the campus, it provides purpose for everything else. My goal is to emulate the same connection Brian provided to me for the students at my campus. He influenced me more than any other. Through him, I learned patience, understanding, and what being a mentor can mean to a student. With each student I connect with at school, I hope I will instill the passion, hope, and respect that Brian did for me. Thank you, Brian. I think I'm holding a plaque and $20,000. So come and get it. honor.
Thank you.
We don't want to drop this. Congratulations.
It's a plate. Thank you.
Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Of course, amazing.
Thank you. You're amazing.
So Elsie was a new school, first new school at Santa Rosa in a lot of years. Oh, Mike, sorry. Teacher voice. First new school, she was the first graduating class, he was the second graduating class. And both these young people, comparably, have done amazing things. Jim has done amazing work at his current school. He's loved by his students. And Selah has done so much for Elsie Allen, the high school I work at. She has started foundations, and she's a triathlete of just unbelievable merit. And she runs triathlons and raises money for the school. And one of the things that just about her that touches me so deeply is when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, she's out there with her running club, handing out food and she's just a wonderful, both these people have just wonderfully large hearts. Probably not in the way I have a large heart, but in the good way you have a large heart. Wonderful. So I thank you both. I thank you both. Thank you. So there's actually one other person I would personally like to recognize, and all of us in this classroom, in this room, who are teachers, this classroom. Okay, get your Cornell notes. I want to do a T-chart real quick. Andy, do you have your homework done? No. Every school has this person, and they're often in the background, and they make so much happen. And I get this award, and I'm just unbelievably touched, unbelievably moved. But every school has a school secretary, right? And I'm fortunate that my school secretary is here, Virginia Bagley, and she just makes so much happen. And for all of you who teach and get the honor of working with these beautiful young people, remember who gets the toner for all that stuff. So, Virginia, thank you so much for just being such a big part of my teaching experience. I'm glad you're here tonight. Thank you.